So we'll start off our roundtable discussion in a good way with our land acknowledgement. And so before we begin, I want to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat peoples. I also acknowledge that we convene this meeting upon the treaty lands of the First Nations of the Williams Treaty and the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation as our closest community. We must also acknowledge that we're all treaty peoples, including those who came here as settlers, as immigrants, either in this generation or in generations past, and those who came here involuntarily, particularly as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. We must also recognize the fact that this colonial nation is founded in historic and ongoing dispossession of this land's indigenous peoples and African descendant peoples. Today, we especially pay tribute to those ancestors of African indigenous origin and descent. As an organization that centers on social justice, we feel it is critical to be informed on the past and ongoing consequences of colonialism. We encourage everyone to learn about the history of these lands and to support resistance here and across Turtle Island. We give thanks for the land that nourishes us and enables us to live in communities. May we continue to aspire to nurture and care for this land and for each other. And with that being said, welcome to Shameela, who is going for trustee candidate for York Region Public School Board. We have Nadia, who is going for council in Ward 7, and we have Luther, who is in Aurora, trustee. Yes, Aurora-Stouffville, going for trustee. Yes. So glad to have you, and we have Ehab here with us in person. Everyone at home, welcome. So we'll start. Let's jump in. Let's talk, and I hope that folks at home will have questions for our candidates tonight, and I hope that Ehab will have some questions as well. So tell us. We'll start with Shameela.
Sure.
Tell us who you are a little bit.
Oh, I thought you were going to read my bio.
I won't, because I didn't get from
No,
level
that's
2.
okay.
So.
I'll share.
Oh, I didn't have.
No, no worries. That's
I don't want to.
No, that's fine.
Want to be equitable.
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. So I'm Shameela. I'm a long time, well, we consider a long time, but I've been living in Newmarket for 17 years with my family. I have 4 children, all of them in the public school system. But just a little bit of background about me. I was born in South Africa, came here at the age of 3, and I like to say that our family moved from Joburg to Coburg. So I lived in Coburg, which is just east of Toronto, for many years until I was a teenager, and then moved to York Region. My background in terms of education is I went to the University of Western Ontario for an undergraduate degree in linguistics and psychology, and then I did a master's degree at OIC U of T. It feels like so long ago. And then worked at Sick Kids for many years. And then when we moved up to Newmarket, the commute was just too much. So I've been in private practice for about 25 years as a psychometrist. So doing assessments for mainly children and teenagers with so psychoeducational assessments. So for learning disabilities, ADHD, psychosocial matters, and love it. So I just like keep at it because I love it. And then I've just been doing a lot of volunteer work in the community. So at my children's both elementary and secondary schools, and then within the community with Newmarket Parent Network, a lot of parent engagement events. That's how Teresa and I met. And then in terms of York Region with the York Communities for Public Education, which is an advocacy group for public education, and just lots of different volunteer stuff within Newmarket and York Region. And yes, it brought me to the place where I felt that the timing was right to run for a trustee position. I've been doing a lot of advocacy work already through my Facebook group and just within the community, and I just thought, this is it's time for me to have a seat at the table. So here I am.
Welcome to the table.
Thank you.
Nadia, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I completed an undergraduate degree at Carleton for Human Rights and Social Justice, and I just graduated with my master's in political science. Thank you. So yes, I'm younger and may not have as much experience as my colleagues as well, but I do find that I'm driven by my ambition and my passion for promoting social equality, and I've grown up in Newmarket my entire life, a lifelong resident, so I've seen firsthand how the community has changed, and coming from immigrant parents, I'm also used to experiencing social inequality as well, and because I want to ensure a better future for future generations, that's why I felt inspired to go for Ward 7 Councillor. And I also want to motivate other young people to get involved with politics because I think it's very important. And I think there also needs to be a seat at the table for young people as well, because we are also members of the community and we also have a voice. So I want to motivate others to get involved.
Shameela, do you mind admitting that person? Shameela is also doing tech tonight. All right. So just give me a thumbs up if you heard Nadia, if her volume was okay. Give me a thumbs up. Hello, Milton.
Jerisa, how are you?
Oh, I can hear you so clearly.
Excellent, excellent. That's good to know.
We're just doing introductions. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the invitation.
Awesome. So we just heard from Shameela and Nadia, and now we're going to hear from Luther.
My name is Luther Brown, and I am a retired school principal. I served in Toronto for a number of years, and since there are young people in the room, no, I've served in 7 schools as principal. The last school I was at was the Afrocentric Alternative School in Toronto. I worked in, my first school was Brookview Middle School, which is a school that changed from James Junior High to Brookview Middle School, and I served there for a while. And then I was promoted there as vice principal. And I spent 2 years as vice principal there. And I went off to Bala as vice principal at Western and Virginia. Eventually I got promoted. Well, the following year I got promoted to be principal at Portage Trail Middle School. And while I was there, I got a call. We were two years in the process of really making the school run in the kind of way that we would like to see it run. Lots of cooperation with teachers and community and all of that. And then my superintendent came and said, I needed to go to place X because there are some difficulties there that we feel your skill set would have. And so I was moved. And it seems like over the years, I have mainly been moved because of particular needs that called to the skill set that I bring. I served the Toronto School Administrators Association as chair. Chair in the TSAA is like president of the union, or president of the organization. And so my job was mainly to liaise with the school district, with the trustees, with the board, with the director, to make sure things work. I was lead negotiator for the terms and conditions and so on. So that kind of experience outside of my principal experience is what allowed me to feel that, you know, I should be able to do a good job of trustee. Plus, I work with trustees, so I know how they operate, and I see I see the need, and I feel that I can do the job that would represent the community as well. I also believe that in spite of the fact that I might have much knowledge from lived experience and from schooling, if I am representing you, I have to know what it is you want in order to represent you well. If I were to come in with my ideas and say, this is what we want to do, then that's not representative. That's kind of pushing my idea. And my practice over the years has been to work with people. So in schools, we always had good community relations. You don't have 3,000 people coming out to a school council meeting, but you have all of the parents being involved in whatever activities that we're doing, because we reach out one-on-one and we meet with them and we have conversations. And I think that helps me it prepares me for what this role could be. I am also a doctoral candidate. My research is about how to produce equitable schooling outcomes for students. The PhD is being done at Boise, UT, and I am in the final stages, I think, of putting the dissertation together. So I'm looking forward to ending that.
That's amazing. Congratulations on that. That's
From
wonderful.
a community standpoint, for those who are out there, you might know, I had the baddest radio program in the city for 25 years. It used to be called Caribbean Crucible on 105.5. Play the best reggae, have the most awesome interviews. It's crazy. So, that's a little bit of me.
Awesome. So there is some rules of engagement for tonight because we are limited to an hour, as you know. So when we ask the questions from those of you at home and the ones that I've sort of have at hand from the community that were shared with me, we'll give each candidate about a minute and a half, if we could, so that we can get through, so that we can be equitable, right? So that everyone has a chance. Is that okay with everyone? All right. So before I jump into the questions that I've received from the community, does anyone at home, do you have any questions that you came with? We'll start with you. Feel free to use the raise hand feature and we'll call on you to speak. Oh, okay, we have Matthew. Matthew, go ahead.
Hello, happy to see all our candidates here this evening. I have a question for trustee candidate Shameela. We've had various incidents of I would say racialized hatred directed towards both the Black and Jewish communities in York region in recent months and years. And I'm just wondering about what you see your role in sort of achieving accountability to ensure those school boards investigate those incidents and there's proper follow-up if there is an investigation and if there are individuals who are found to have committed those acts.
Great question. So yeah, I mean, there have been a number of incidents and I know that they have been looking into them. So I know more about the ones at Newmarket High School, just because my son was one of the students that was interviewed by the police and by the administrators. So I know that they're looking into it. The board does take it very seriously. They have the dismantling anti-Black racism strategy in place. So work is being done in terms of follow-up and accountability. I think that's where we need to do more work. That's where the community isn't hearing what the results are when they are doing these investigations and when they are trying to engage with the community. There isn't that accountability piece. So what I'd like to bring to the table is asking for that accountability and really pushing for it in the sense that there has to be better communication with families about outcomes. And so it's one thing to say, oh, we're dismantling, we're trying to, but there has to be bring it back around and report back to us. I think that's where parents get very frustrated and the community gets frustrated, right? So we all, I think at every level, all the stakeholders, including the students, they want to know too, like what is happening with this so that there isn't ongoing harm for our Black community and for the Jewish community and others. Like there have been other incidents as well. So we need to keep pushing for that. And that's at a school level and a board level, right? Especially when it's happening at multiple schools. So I don't have the answers in terms of how to work around that, because I find sometimes with the board, everything is very secretive. They have private meetings and then they don't report back. So one of my pieces, like I said, is communications. I want to get in there and figure out how we can better communicate with families.
Yes, thank you for that. Thank you for that answer, Shameela. And as well as I heard two pieces in that, both the reporting back and the communication piece. You sound very, very committed to the reporting back piece, but on the communication piece, as Luther was suggesting, a lot of these Black and racialized families get their information maybe from ethnic minority radio stations. So that's maybe an idea of how to reach out to those communities in terms of updating them on what is happening. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from home? All right, so I'll move to my questions from the community. So I'll jump in with this one and feel free, I think this is open to anyone who wants to answer. Considering how divided the political culture has become, how are you prepared to bring people together on major issues of concern?
I think, I'll jump on this. I think it's not possible to bring people together without communication when you talk about communication. If we don't talk to each other, and if we don't listen to each other, and if we don't make sense of each other's interests, then we're not going to be able to move as quickly in the direction that we want. So I think communication is one really important part of it. And there are several ways to hear from the community. And the part is that are aggrieved, they have to be heard. Because it is their story that we need to work with. And the ones who are bringing the negative energies, you also have to hear from them. Now, sometimes the divide is so rigid, like we're seeing it in the political spectrum right now, where people are just polarized. However, I think if you listen to them, you will hear that there are things in what they're saying that we can work with to bring people together. Because yes, we're divided, but if you listen to what people say, okay, I really want my children to be safe at school, but they're saying it a different way. So if we can pick out from what they're saying about the safety, then we can talk about safety. And so that's how I see that as the response.
Thank you.
If I could jump in as well. It's kind of adding on to what you were saying about hearing from both sides. I think that it's important that people remember that municipal politics are nonpartisan. It's one question that I get a lot when I'm knocking on doors. A lot of people tend to forget that part, that we're not supposed to be divided in that way. Mm-hmm. But even so, we can acknowledge those different views. And I think that there are positives that can be taken from all sides. And I think it's really important that people feel heard and that what they're saying is valued. So I think that there are definitely opportunities to take from both sides, all sides, however you want to phrase it, and not so much try to isolate people to one side. I think there just needs to be more opportunities to come together and take ideas from everyone and see how we can come to solutions and make decisions that will benefit the greatest amount of people and not just a certain side.
Shameela,
that's
some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just to add, I think that having the voices of all stakeholders, right? Like, so we have to make sure we ask our youth what are they thinking, because I always think the youth just have a different perspective, because I'll say things And my kids will be like, what are you talking about? Like, that's not a thing. And I'm like, no, it is a thing. And for them, it's not a thing because they don't see it or they're not experiencing it. So I think having those conversations with including our youth in those discussions is really important because we see things very differently sometimes. And their world is very much on social media, right? So what they're saying, especially social justice issues, I find that the way that they view social justice issues are very, it's fantastic because they're getting it from so many different ways, whereas some of us might be more rigid in our thinking or only going with our lived experiences, right? So yeah, that's the only thing I would add is that we need to make sure that we're getting all stakeholders involved as much as possible and through different avenues. Like I like the idea of the radio station podcast, like those kind of things, like really bringing people in together to have those discussions.
Can I just comment to that? Quite often, the idea of hearing from both sides is being demonized. It's kind of, you're hearing that you're doing the both sides argument, so you're kind of not really doing what you're supposed to do. And so I'd like to put it out that if you don't hear from all of the parties that are involved, there is no way you can know what the interests of the people are. And you have to hear from them. So the notion of both sides as being a wishy-washy thing is not. It's a really important part of problem solving.
Good point. Any questions from home? Any comments from home or questions? All right.
There's one in the chat.
There's one in the
Something
chat.
but I don't know what it is. I don't know, somebody posted a comment that we can check.
We'll check that closer towards the end. All right, so another question that I have that came in to us was, as you know, this organization, as was read in the land acknowledgement, is centered on social justice. And equity is important. Someone mentioned, I think Matthew had mentioned in his first question about the incidences of anti-Semitism and anti-Black racism. How are you prepared to advocate for the needs of the Black community without isolating other community members in Newmarket?
Black community members are
Or
members.
Aurora?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or Scoville.
Black community members are members of the community. And students who are Black or students who are racialized, they have a right to the same high quality education as everybody else. We've gotten to a place where we are sort of afraid to say that we're looking out for the interests of that group of people who are disadvantaged in humongous ways. But if it is the fact, it is the fact. And so we have to respond to that. Jim Collins in his book, Good to Great, talks about confronting the root of facts. And part of confronting the root of facts is to get all of the information so you can work with it. I remember when TDSB was being pushed to start collecting data on race. And it was a huge problem. But it turned out that because the system didn't have official knowledge about certain issues, the system could do without dealing with it. But now that you know that 25% of your students are going in this or that, you cannot run from it, right? So I think it's important for us to recognize that we have to meet the needs where they are, and whether it is racism or sexism or any kind of phobia, you still have to address it based on what it is. And you can't go in with a preconceived notion that this is all going to solve it, because your solution might not work with the problem that's at hand.
Yeah, I like the data-driven analysis as well, because that helps, right? Like, so as much as you think, oh, it's going to keep us in silos, it is important to know what is happening with that data so that you can make decisions based on that. So whether it's for different streaming or different programs, I think all of that has to be, you have to advocate for that, for for everybody, for not, like for Black students, for racialized students, for anybody, you know, a lot of marginalized students have different needs within that. So I think that as long as it's data driven, I think it's going to help a lot. You know, and I know we've talked about this, like it's not a matter of kind of having it like oppression Olympics where we're saying, oh well, this group needs this and this group needs it more, and it's more just there are needs for every community and for our entire community, and they, you know, you just have to make sure that whatever decisions are being made are student centered for in terms of being a trustee. I know it's different at the counselor level, but just you know, just thinking about how all students will benefit from this, not just the students that you think are going to benefit. It should be, you know, even if you do something that's going to benefit Black students, the reality is that it should be then benefiting all students, right? There should be a ripple effect with it. So, and for generations to come. So,
and it's not a trickle down. It's not a trickle down. It is the reality that if you have good pedagogical practices for one group of students, those pedagogical practices can be adjusted, adapted to meet the needs of others. Okay, so once we look at students' need, that's where you make your adjustment. That's where you do the things that you need to do to make students achieve at high levels.
Yeah.
And you can't reasonably say that the way our systems are operating right now, students are being equitably served and we're getting the kind of equitable outcomes that we want, because we're not. And the students are saying it very clearly in the research that I'm doing. They have clearly said that you need to be able to differentiate appropriately. And one of the foundation practices in education is differentiated instruction. And differentiated instruction is meeting the kid where the kid is and adjust your education practice so that the student can benefit. And it's not a willing thing, it's in the curriculum. It's in the assessment plan from the Ministry of Education.
And that's how you achieve equity.
That's what you do.
Yes. All right, so wonderful. Let me move on. Is there any question? Oh, we have a hand up. Milton. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Jerisa. Good evening, candidates. And let me just say that it takes great bravery to put your name forward. It takes great courage. So I respect your courage and thank you very much for putting your names forward. I have two questions. Now, the first one has to do with the groundswell of opinions when it comes to how Black history is taught in schools. Evidently, it is being taught from a negative perspective, from a deficit perspective, as opposed to being taught from an affirming perspective. How do you plan to change that within the school boards? That's my first question. My second question is, on the 25th of October, when you have discovered that you have won, you were triumphant, and onward, how will you hold yourselves accountable to the people who voted for you? Those are my two questions, and I will listen with great interest to your answers.
I think I can only really speak to the second question. I guess in terms of how I plan to hold myself accountable, one of my, I guess something that I'm very passionate about is being as transparent as possible with the public, because we see how when elected leaders are secretive about certain things, that tends to breed a lot of mistrust with the public. So I really value having an open line of communication. And if I was to be successful, I would be as transparent as possible with anyone who was to ask me questions, and I would reveal as much information that I guess is appropriate or is allowed of me in my position. And it'll just be a continuing process. It's not that accountability piece is something that's ongoing, and it's not just something that exists in a certain time. So I think that having that open line of communication throughout the term, if I was to be successful, would be how I would maintain that accountability.
I'm going to speak to the first question that Milton asked. I know where you're coming from with that, because I think that it's one of those things where, you know, every February we have Black History Month, and all of a sudden there's this flurry of activity around that, and it's you know, talking about the history, which is great. But then I look forward to those posts and the talk about Black excellence. So I know that YRDSB has been trying to focus on that. So I would definitely continue to push for that. Like we can't be always looking at the deficit model for this. It has to be celebrating the what's happened in the past, the good and the bad, and moving forward from there. But definitely focusing on Black excellence. You know, always like with everything. So I would like to continue with that. And then just in terms of the second one, you know, once this is all over, I think it should just be a natural progression where you are accountable and you make sure that that I'm going to be meeting the needs of all residents. So anybody who reaches out, I try to make sure that I connect with them within a good amount of time, 24 hours if possible. And just being responsive is always important, I think, in any role, whether it's a trustee or counselor or mayor or anything. That's what we're signing up for, is to make sure that we're responsive. And if we don't know the answer to something, because again, for all of us, we would be new to these roles, doing our research, doing our homework, reaching out to people who know more than we do. So that's kind of where I would be. I know that the first little while, it takes a while to have that learning curve. But yeah, I mean, I know you also have to kind of get going right away with things. So I would definitely be here for all of Newmarket families.
I think the idea about Black history is important for us to understand that there is a need for critical understanding of Black history. We often are recognizing that there's a lot of low-level knowledge being distributed. Who invented that? When was this? We're talking dates sometimes. We're not talking about the critical agency that Black people showed during the times and are showing now when social injustice is happening in real time. What are the critical things that Black people have done? How have we sustained ourselves over that trajectory so that I can sit here and have this conversation? So we need to refocus how we approach the teaching of Black history, the teaching of history in general. We have to become more focused on helping people to become critical thinkers, and critical thinkers who can provide creative solutions. Okay, trustees don't control the curriculum. The curriculum is a Ministry of Education function. Trustees control policy in school board, and the school board policy is that Black history is taught throughout the year as a regular part of your day-to-day life, and that there is critical thinking engaged in that. Everybody in the community benefits. We get to learn from each other, and people who don't know it and have and operate out of the stereotypes that are out there, that gets help. So that's one way I think of looking at that. Regarding what do I do after I hear a win? Well, I'd celebrate a little bit, and then I would think about how do I reach out to my communities to hear from them. So what I would do is organize to meet with my communities, to hear from them. Well, first of all, to thank them for electing me, and then to hear from them, how do I serve you in this area? Because we know that they need to be represented effectively. we also know that the district has had its fair share of upheavals around race and other stuff. So we need to rebuild a trust factor for the district. But as an individual trustee, I don't have the power to do that. My power lies in collaborating with others and being able to get people to work towards where we're going. But I think I would need to hear from my constituents first.
Can I add a
Well-
comment before? So sorry. Just adding on to what Luther was saying about teaching Black history throughout the year and not just in a specialized time. That made me think of an experience that I had in high school that I feel like it's important to share. When I was in, I think, grade 10 maybe, I remember asking my history teacher, we tend to learn about one group of people predominantly, but I know there's a rich Black history and other races within Canada as well. And I'm just wondering, when are we going to get to that? Are we going to get to that? And my teacher told me that's not just, it's just not in the curriculum. So it's just not something that we teach. And I just remember feeling so shocked by that answer. And that's something that still stuck with me to this day. And I think that's really, I mean, I think it really speaks to how Black students are, I guess, raised throughout the school system and how that has an impact on their identity. So I think initiatives like that are really important. That was just something that stuck out to me.
Well, candidates, sorry, I just want to thank you very much for your answers and thank you very much for putting your names forward for service. And Jerisa, thank you very much for hosting such an important forum. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Milton. I saw Maxine's hand earlier. Maxine, did you still want to ask your question before we go to George?
Yes.
Okay.
First of all, I echo what Milton said about having guts. There's a joke there, but I won't go there. I am grateful as well for the clarification that as trustees you deal with policy. So it seems a small thing, but that's a powerful thing. And I think to go to Milton's question, you know, I would love to see policy that would kind of make it a fact and a teaching that Black history did not start with the Atlantic slave trade. And I'm not sure if that's the deficit or a part of the deficit that Milton was talking about, but that is what came to mind. As well as policy, there are certain teachings, and some of these teachings, I mean, it would not just impact the Black community, but the racialized community. Should I mention Marcus Garvey? Maybe I should not, but I'll throw that out there. There have been many efforts to get interest in Caribbean authors, African authors. When I say African, mainly West African authors, indigenous authors. And these are efforts not just of Newmarket Library, Vaughan Public Library, and I'm not sure that there has been a zeal or an interest in the schools in Newmarket and possibly Aurora to latch on to those authors. And the reason it is important is that persons in the Caribbean in Newmarket, we tend to be not seen. We seem to be invisible, but we are quite a strong force. And I've had adults, parents telling me of children with mental health issues because they cannot connect to their Caribbean heritage. And so that means that, you know, some of these things are just coming from an inability to connect with some roots wherever. It's not just the Caribbean roots, but we can look to book. And I'm rambling now because I'm so passionate about it, but I hope you get the point I'm trying to get across.
Thanks, Maxine. Yes, I think the point you're trying to get across is the importance of connecting in one's environment so that they have a sense of belonging. So point well taken there. And if you don't have the literature, which is why we have the Iris Malcolm Library here.
Yes, and so policy, if they can work on that kind of a policy that kind of, I guess, enlightens the powers that be of the importance of that connection.
The importance of the connection through books. A lot of libraries in the board are working on doing that check with their libraries. I know a lot of the local schools are doing that. I've gone around and I've heard them saying they're going through all their books to make sure they have culturally relevant, that's the buzzword now, culturally relevant books in the library. So I know that some of the schools are doing that work. I see George. George, you're on camera, go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you again for putting your heads out there and throwing your names in the ballot boxes to represent our community. It does take a lot of courage. I echo what Milton also has said. I have a simple little question, and it's in regards to Black History Month. And you know, as much as I really support the Black History Month, the question is there a White History Month or is there an Asian History Month? And the reason why I ask that is there shouldn't really be a 1 month of Black history. I mean, what do you really learn? This should be, again, part of a curriculum and embedded into the minds of not only just Black individuals, but Indigenous and also other different backgrounds, so that we all get to learn and understand the truths of where we come from. If we don't know where we come from, how do we know where we're going? And, you know, it is very difficult to learn that all in 1 month. And again, like I echo, you know, if there's no other history months, like a Jewish month or, you know, or any particular single month for any community, why is it only just, you know, associated around Black history? So, you know, I was more thinking of, you know, looking in a curriculum that will span across the school semesters, as opposed to just, you know, one particular month. And that's, you know, to me, that is the most important thing that a candidate could bring to the table, as opposed to just discussing, you know, some of the policies around equality in that way. So, you know, when you give a level playing field, you can see what we've done in athletics. What do you think we could do in education? So at that point, I leave it with you, you know, counselors. You know, I hope that, you know, or trustees, I hope that you guys could keep that in mind. And if there's a focus, it's all about education for me. And the other opportunity would be around our entrepreneurs that are in Aurora market, you know, reaching out to them, asking for their assistance, seeing where their problems are, seeing where you can help. If that's something that you can do, please, I would, you know, look up every, you know, BIPOC or Indigenous or, you know, Black business that's in Aurora Newmarket, and really reach out to them and find out what you can do to help them.
I want to just talk a little bit about that, because I think that's where representation is really important, right? So yes, the policies, there's curriculum is set by the Ministry of Education, but YRDSB has a policy department as well. And we have people who work on policies specifically for our schools. So as long as those committees and those groups are well represented by everybody, you know, Black community, we want to have racial equity, we want to have, and they are getting better about that. So I know that our current principal at my kids' elementary school just spent 5 years in curriculum, and he's a racialized person. So that made me feel really great. I'm like, oh, there actually is representation. So I want to look more into that to see if that is happening across the board, and, you know, having it filtered down. And same thing, representation at all levels, right? Like we want to have it at the school board, we want to have it at, you know, counselor. You talked about how we've never had a Black counselor in all of Newmarket in all the years. So that's where we have to have that representation. We need the community support to make that happen. for the policies to get into place, because otherwise it's harder to push for those things if we're not there, right? Or
Yes.
it's like that, we have to be represented, or the children need to be represented by those who have those experiences and the people and the community, right, behind us, so or beside us. Yeah.
My comment about why Black history and why not every other history is Black History Month came up to meet the need. There was a severe lack in the teaching of anything positive about Black people in the curriculum. So the idea was, let us put aside some time to bring that to the attention of everybody. And the way it has manifested itself is, we get some low-level conversation and we just do it because it's the month. However, if we were to pay attention to the need for belonging, as we heard earlier on, for students to feel that they are included in the curriculum. When students feel they are included in the curriculum, they become more belong to that environment and the performance gets better. Okay, so if we were to get the Ministry of Education to directly include in the curriculum content about Black history, then that would help because it would be in the curriculum as such. As it is now, schools can teach using whatever props, whatever material they want. Because if our curriculum says that we should learn to respect each other and work collaboratively with each other and so on and so forth, then how do we learn to work as different races? We probably need to talk about that. It's kind of like it's hard to have a group with all male and expect to get female sensibilities coming out of that group because none of the males have the female experience. So when you have female experience at the table, you're able to have that to guide decision making. So I get the point that February is a short month and you can't teach much in there, but I also get the point that if we didn't have it, maybe we wouldn't be having the conversations that we're having. And I get the point also that it needs to be broader than that. And we need to be more inclusive of all of us who are Canadian. And all of us need to see ourselves in the curriculum and in the daily lessons. I think you made another point, but I'm missing it right now.
I also wanted to speak to a comment that George made about reaching out to entrepreneurs in the community as well. Something that I was really interested in doing, if I was to be successful, is really reaching out to entrepreneurs and other organizations within the community as well, and sort of building a database of different resources that people can look towards, or different businesses that people can patronize at, that are of racialized or other marginalized individuals. And I think if I was to step into that role, since I am so new to the whole world as well, or I guess that world of municipal politics, I would really like to lean on those different organizations and entrepreneurs and really see what they need and what they offer to the community and build partnerships that we can all benefit from. So I would really like to build that sort of database within Newmarket and even branch out to Aurora, Stouffville, so that we can have that interconnectedness throughout the GTA and just be able to rely on each other and patronize each other and support each other.
Thanks, Nadia. Wow. Wonderful. We're in the last 5 or so minutes of our conversation. Time flies when you're. So I think I will, lots of good conversations about the curriculum, about representation, about belonging and connection, and about accountability. I think accountability is huge. I think for our community, for many communities actually, we tend to want to find out about our leaders after they've been elected. I think what we're doing tonight is something a little bit different. We're trying to get to know who they are before they enter office. And I think we need to do more of that. We need to be engaged more with our candidates before they take the seat in office. So I want to end this session on a lighter, if you will, note for the last 5 minutes and ask you something more personal. And it's 2 questions and you can each decide which one. So the first one is, what principles guide your decision-making process? Just list them, don't explain them. And the second one is, tell us about someone you consider as a role model and why. So principles that guide you or your role model and why. We'll start with Shameela.
I mean, I think we're all in this for honorable reasons. So for me, the principles are pretty solid, but I think definitely my role model is my mom, my late mom. She passed away many years ago, but she was just always, the one thing I remember about her is always just being there for the community. I think she's one of those, like the glue for our South African Muslim community. And that was something that kind of was really instilled in all of us, was that sense of community is so important. And just to always represent well, right? It's not that, it wasn't from, you know, we hear a lot with the South Asian thing, I think maybe other cultures as well, but just that don't bring shame to the family. With my mom, it was very much, you go out there and you, no matter what you do, you be the best at it, right? You go and you represent to the fullest, you represent the best possible. So I think that's something that is always with me, that I strive for.
May her soul rest in peace. Luther, thank you, Shameela.
For me, I can't remember a time when social justice wasn't my thing. It has always been my core. So that helps me to define excellence in students' performance, excellence in teaching students, excellence in working with students. I also know that I have to be an agent. There has to be agency in what I do. There's this crazy word called praxis, which basically says you use your knowledge to take action to benefit people. So those are some of my guiding principles. You can't do social justice unless you're respecting and working with people. You asked about role model. Professional role model is probably a principal I had at Brookview Middle School, the late Vernon Farrell, whose work was to ensure that leaders are created. Leaders who would have the best interests of students. Leaders who would recognize that Black students are human beings, and they should benefit from education like everybody else. And as educators, we have a role to educate everybody. So that's one of the things I've picked up from him as a role model. His little bit of time at Brookview turned out a gazillion principals and vice principals and leaders in school districts. And Brookview is a chain of Finch. Someone knows about chain of Finch, but he did that. there. Right? Well, of course, I can't leave my parents out because they did the thing.
Thank you, Luther.
Thank you.
I guess my guiding principles would be operating under an anti-oppression framework, anti-racism, also feminism and intersectionality are also two other frameworks that I like to base my decisions from as well. And I guess for a professional role model that inspires me, over the past year, I've worked for the mayor of Burlington, Mary Ann Mead Ward, and she is absolutely amazing. I learned so much working in her office, and I really admire her leadership style, and she's really someone that really cares about the community. And when you speak to anyone in Burlington, everyone recognizes her face. So many organizations love to work with her. Everyone wants her at their events because she's so passionate about uplifting these groups and uplifting people whose voices tend to be silenced. So I really admire her leadership style, and I would like to model myself after that as well. So that's who one of my role models are.
That's
Yeah,
amazing.
Oh yes, I feel very fortunate.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna add, that's what we need more of within our communities, right? Is that mentorship piece is so important.
Yeah.
And we have to build that up. Yeah.
Absolutely. That being said, we're at the end of our roundtable discussion Q&A. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming down.
Thank you for being there.
Best wishes.
Thank you.
Good luck.
And so for anyone who had missed this session, will be.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Right, everyone.
Good night.
Have a great night, everybody.